The book of Chronicles was written after the Babylonian exile. So if you've been following along in this series, you will know that at the end of the book of 2 Kings, we had the fall of Jerusalem, with almost all of the people of God now either being killed or taken off into captivity. And we said at the time that humanly, it looks like the end of the story, but the Bible is a big book and we are far from the end of it. And so we have the exile of Babylon, which we'll explore in greater detail in later books. But in a miraculous turn of events, the king of Babylon allows God's people to go back to their homeland, to rebuild their walls, to rebuild their temple, and to resettle their land. Now that era of resettling, it was anything but plain sailing. It's perhaps difficult for us to get into the mindset of these exiles, but they are coming back now to a place that is just full of rubble and dust. A place where the oldest among them will look around and see just ghosts of Israel's former glory everywhere around them. And the youngest among them, of course, will only ever have heard stories of Israel's former glory. They never even saw it for themselves. The thought of just how much work has got to go on now is almost overwhelming. And so, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the chronicler, who many think is Ezra, but is unnamed in the text, he sets about writing the history of God's people. You might say, well, we've already got the history, fine. But the explicit aim of this particular history is to inspire God's people that they are indeed the people of the living God. Now, the book starts with basically 9 chapters of genealogies, which might cause you to sigh in frustration, but don't write this off too quickly. There are really beautiful gems in these genealogies. We may not find every paragraph here to be like edge of the seat, action-packed, suspense-filled story, but what is written here matters a great deal to the people of Israel. It matters a great deal to the God of Israel, and it ought to matter at least a little bit to you and I as well. And so the book begins. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. All that has ever unfolded upon the earth can trace its roots all the way back to the Garden of Eden. All the beauty, all the betrayal, all the nations and tribal divisions, all of the rebellion and all of the religion, it all goes back to Adam. And then we are told of the great flood, and it is as though Noah is the new head of the human race. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then, a bit like an ancient hyperlink, the writer clicks on Japheth and expands his family line. He then goes to Ham and expands his family line, and then finally to Shem to reveal his family line. Having studied through this much of the Bible together already, my guess is that at least some of the names of the descendants of Ham spring out to you as significant. Listen to this. Both Egypt and Canaan were descendants of Ham. Isn't that stunning? Think of the territories that took their names after these men and the role those places play in the Bible. Cush had a famous son, Nimrod, a mighty warrior on the earth, who was in fact the founder of Babylon, wherever the Israelites just come from. Yes, Babylon. We'll come back to that. Egypt, we read, was also the father of the Casluhites, from whom the Philistines came, and the third son, Canaan, from whom all the tribes of the Canaanites were born. So almost all of the enemies of the people of God were born into the tribe of Ham. The Babylonians who brutally besieged them and cruelly took them captive, they have now been moved by the hand of God to allow them to go home. Yes, even the Babylonians can trace their way back to the Garden of Eden. The Egyptians, who were overthrown all the way back in the Exodus story. The Philistines, who have been the near constant foe of God's people in Israel. The Canaanites, who were those that the Israelites were commanded to contend with and clear out of the promised land. They all find their root in the family of Adam. But as we continue to read, we read about the family of Shem, finding in his family the man born Abram, but renamed Abraham, the father of nations. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac had 2 sons, Esau and Israel. The rest of the chapter expands on the sons of Esau, and the next chapter will expand upon the sons of Israel. Esau's family became the Edomites, and they, likewise, were often pretty wicked and warped as a nation. Now, what hope would the Israelites find in this foundational text? Well, at least this much, I think, that the history of God's people is a history of conflict. And yet, do you remember how God humbled the Egyptians? Do you remember how God crushed the Canaanites? Do you remember how God fought off the Philistines through his people? This chapter, I think, reminds the aching Israelites that they are the people of God, that their God is mighty. He has promised them the victory. And while the story has been long and winding, it is not finished yet. All they need to do is put their hope in the living God, and they will see not just his power, but that he always keeps his promises. He promised Abraham that he would give him a great people and a beautiful place, and he would be present with them as their God, and he will keep that promise to the very end.